you can kind of let the walls come down a little bit and engage in a real way, maximize the opportunity to hear from him. So a couple tips I like to make sure that I share. On the one side, he's going to give you permission to, like, this chair looks a little risky, doesn't it? Oh.
But it is a little risky.
There's like a gap right here that feels really unhealthy. He's going to say, hey, just ask your question from the heart. And if you just kind of ramble on for 3 minutes about, trying to land on what you really want to know, then that's, 2.5 minutes that he's not going to have the opportunity to respond. So what I like to do is set the high goal of the reason we're having the time with him is to get stuff from him, not to hear our voice while he's in the room. You see what I'm saying? So if you can get to the question as quickly as possible, that means he has more time to respond. What he typically does is you'll ask a question, then he'll go off for 20, 30 minutes about all sorts of stuff. And then you're sitting there going like, well, he asked my question and every question I didn't know to ask. So what else do I say? So you got to be in the moment. And what we're trying to do is not so much get our specific questions asked as set him free to share what he feels, like he can share based on the direction that we give him. Does it make sense? So, if you ask him a question that's like, hey, what is it really like to be under the pressure of the urine or whatever, something like that, then he'll start talking, and before you know it, somebody in the room's crying, and, there's prophesying and all that happening. That's possible. You see what I'm saying? So we want to try to get out of our way. So that's tip number one, is just try to get out of our way as much as possible to allow him to share everything that he has to share. He usually goes the time that we have allotted, but I've seen him go as much as like an hour and a half over. And so we're in the morning. That means that we could run through lunch. He'll probably be hungry, so I'm guessing that we'll keep it pretty close, like 12:30 might be the latest we go. But I'm just telling you, don't have lunch plans. Don't be like, oh, it's 11:50. I've got lunch with, who would be funny? Got lunch with Evan.
That's so funny.
We're committed. We're committed. We're committed to have pancakes at every breakfast place in the city, and
That's a great goal.
whatever. So just let that go. Don't have any plans for any time close to when we're done. Just let that run as long as it goes. And if pastor's having a blast, like it's happened before where he's been like, hey, order pizza, get pizza in here and then the interns are sitting there eating pizza and he's having a great time. So who knows? Just be open to whatever, and don't necessarily have anything scheduled backed up, even within like an hour and a half after our time. Can I give you a quick tip on how to ask questions?
Yes.
Okay. And this is just for you for any setting. It's a little formula I came up with to try to help people really to know how to get to the point as quickly as possible. So when you're asking somebody a question, especially somebody like Pastor Stephen, the temptation is to want to get like one question, I don't remember who it was, but one question said, what's one of the most difficult challenges you faced in 12 years of ministry, 12 years of leading Elevation Church, and how has that impacted your day-to-day or whatever? There's nothing wrong with that question, but think about the number of things that he could potentially say when you give him a time frame of 12 years, right? So that potentially delays his ability to kind of jump right in and respond. He might jump in and be like, oh, I tell you what, it's this. And it'd be awesome. And even if he delays, he's going to eventually say something that's going to be awesome anyway. So it's a good question. It's going to get him talking. But if you ask the same question, or if you mine for the same kind of information according to the formula I'm about to give you, it gets him on topic immediately, and there's no hesitation. Okay, ready? So here's the formula. You're good at. I struggle with that. Can you help me close the gap? Okay? That's the formula. Very simple. So think about Pastor Stephen. What are the categories that you can see in his life that inspire you, that challenge you, that, make your mind go, what are those categories? Is it his communication? Yeah, probably. More specifically, is it the way that he's able to pull truth out of Scripture, and keep it engaged, keep us engaged and make it relevant? Is it the way that he has energy every time he walks out on stage? What is it? The more specific you can get, the more he's able to see exactly what it is you've noticed, right? And he's a public figure in our lives, so there's a lot that we see about him. And so it's easy when you're asking the question to assume he sees the same things that we see, but he doesn't. He's just like you and I. You know, he doesn't see himself the way that we see him. He sees himself as himself, just like you do. And so I can see your gifts and talents and weaknesses and struggles a lot clearer sometimes than you can, which is why the one-on-one setting, I'm able to like give you all this great advice, hopefully, when I have the same struggles and I can't give myself that same advice because I can't see it in me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when you ask him a question, narrow it down to as specifically as you possibly can about here's what you're great at. So it might be, you know, Pastor, I've noticed that you share a lot of stories about your kids. It seems like you're really engaged with your kids. I'm struggling staying engaged with the relationships that are close to me while carrying the burden of being in ministry. How have you found, you know, patterns of success in staying engaged with the people that you love while also carrying a weight that I imagine is so much greater than what I'm having to carry? Right?
Good question.
It's a great question because you follow the formula. You do this well, I struggle with that, help me close the gap. Make sense? So pick a category. Let's practice real quick. What's something that you see in Pastor Stephen or in Pastor and Holly or in the church that, you know, that he would directly influence or whatever, we feel like you'd be interested to know more about it? You guys online, especially those of you in the park right now, welcome to jump in as well. Parker, can you see Sam and Claude? Yeah, you can.
Oh yeah.
How they're like hanging out in the park, little picnic lunch.
Indian Depot. I think they're crisscross applesauce.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Crisscross applesauce.
Enjoying some orange slices out in the sun.
Philly jammers.
All right, categories?
I know for me, I would love to know his summer prep.
Yeah.
Since it might be relevant every single week.
Yeah.
To preach as much as he does, yet every time it's a life-changing message.
Right.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, so then you asked that question here, and the way you asked it was fine, but it was very direct. So try to apply what you asked in here to the formula that we just talked about, right here in the moment.
Right here, right now?
Yeah, practicing.
Okay. Pastor, you do a great job at communicating to everybody's life and individual obstacles that they're facing. This is something I struggle with, to be able to reach everybody. How do you prepare and how do you receive God's wisdom in doing this?
Yeah, great. So, I mean, it feels pretty intuitive, right? You know, obviously if everybody followed that exact formula and it was all clunky and weird, that wouldn't be great, but you get the idea. I've really noticed, Pastor, that you do such a great job of finding illustrations that bring the scripture to life or that really connect with people at a broad range. You know, as a younger communicator, I'm wanting to learn how to do that better. As a less experienced communicator, I'm wanting to learn how to do that better. What are some practical tips you could give me to help? You know, you see what I'm saying? It's very easy. He knows exactly what you're trying to get at, and he can now jump in and respond. And why am I giving you that? Again, because we're wanting to like get the content out there as quickly as possible, and then get out of the way, so that he can, because he might take that question and be like, you know, actually, I was thinking about it. I'm in the middle of preparing my message for this weekend, and let me run some things by you. And before you know it, you're like caught up in the seventh heaven, you know, hearing the glory in its raw form. You know what I mean? Like, who knows where he's going to go with it? But you know, let me actually. He might be like, let me actually recruit you to help. I'm actually stuck right now. I'm trying to find an illustration. What do you think about? And then all of a sudden, you're in the middle of message prep with one of the greatest communicators in the world right now. That's cool. You know, who knows where he's going to go with it? But he knows where you're trying to lead him, and that makes it a lot easier. And so then we can get out of the way. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. It's going to be awesome. For sure, it's going to be awesome no matter what. And that's Tuesday. Anything else I want to say about that? I don't think so.
We have a gift.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about you don't have to tell me what it is, but what is it?
So it's a painting. I'll go ahead and send it to you guys in the group message, and I'll also send our cost in the group message, so we can discuss that if you guys have any questions. And also a writer's pack for him.
A writer's pack. What is that?
You know, stuff that he needs when he's writing. Inspiration.
Oh, is it Metallica?
Metallica, cassette, some notepads, some gum, some pens, just neat little stuff.
Nice. Holly Furtick hates gum.
Really?
Hates gum.
Why?
Why?
I would take the gum out and put some mints in.
Okay. Thank you.
Huh? I think her older sister used to smack her teeth and chew her gum, and I've heard rumors that she would like take it out and like touch her with it, and she just hates everything about it. She hates the smell of it. She can't even use like mint, like products of any kind, because she's. Yeah. I don't know if she's still that way, but she was that way. Last I heard, she was still that way. So when I was around them a lot more, it was just kind of known that you don't chew gum around Holly. So he loves gum though, so maybe he would want it, but it would have to be a secret stash.
Okay. Maybe it's like mints that also are like it's
Mentos?
Yeah, like a Mentos,
Oh,
where it's like a mint and then it transfers.
That's called Tic Tac gum too now.
Tic Tac gum?
Yeah.
Really?
That's good.
It's like in the same box, it's like Tic Tac gum. It's like Tic Tac.
I feel like that's like
Yeah, it's just.
like microwavable meatloaf.
Oh my god. I tried so Custom Jordans are harder to do than I thought. I was like, oh, we can totally do custom Jordans. And I'm like, no, we can't. We don't have enough time.
But you just did Scott Brinkley.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just scribble it up.
All right. Who is presenting that gift?
Colin.
Me.
Where's Colin?
Colin, you're the gift presenter.
Or Parker. Parker's good.
Or Parker.
Let's give Parker a shot.
Parker, do you want to present the gift?
Hey guys, I can present the gift.
Okay.
Can you get a haircut?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'll get a haircut before.
Yeah, me too.
No, I don't think so.
I like the hair.
Okay, wear a bandana.
What is it? Yeah, wear a bandana. We want the bandana back.
Bring the bandana.
I like the Rocket Raccoon look.
Maybe with the bandana like over, like
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
All right.
Okay, yeah, I can do it.
Sit.
You guys ready to learn how to overcome insecurity?
Yes.
I'm so insecure.
Preach. Preach.
I'm super insecure.
Right now?
Right now.
Just in this moment?
In this moment.
Let's put a spotlight on this. How do you feel now that everyone is staring at you?
I gotta go.
I gotta go, he said. All right. Overcoming insecurity. So I have found, maybe this isn't true across the board, but I have found that most anybody who tries anything struggles with insecurity.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can defeat insecurity by just never doing anything, but then what you're going to end up feeling is regret and doubt and lots of other things. But if you're putting yourself out there and trying something new and sticking your neck out, then insecurity has a tendency to kind of be a byproduct.
Right.
I don't think it has to be though. So I've kind of gone through these little journeys in the last 12 years of being a part of this, where I spent a lot of time wondering if I was good enough, wondering if I was the right one, wondering if I have what it takes. And the byproduct of those questions is insecurity. And when you're insecure, then you're going to end up performing worse, which kind of confirms that you don't have what it takes and that you're not good enough. You know what I mean? And then you're not in the right position because you're performing below your optimum level because it's in insecurity rather than confidence. And then the result of that is that you end up in this weird cycle, right?
Yeah.
So it happened to me probably 5 years ago, where I realized that confidence is not a personality trait, it's a choice. And insecurity is not a personality trait, it's a choice. And all of us feel insecure, but all of us also feel angry and feel sad and feel frustrated and feel overwhelmed and feel whatever. All of us feel lots of things, but just because we feel something doesn't mean we have to live in it and act according to it, right? So what I've put together here hopefully will be helpful for you. It is the ability to choose a different path than in the insecure one, because if you walk down the insecure path, you're going to end up finding the evidence to prove for yourself that you have every reason to be insecure. If you choose to walk down the confident path, you'll end up finding the evidence that proves that you have every right to be confident. You see what I'm saying? And you and I have the choice about which path we walk down. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. Just some qualifiers. true confidence is attractive. True confidence. Now, false confidence, arrogance, self-centeredness, those are not attractive. Those are off-putting. But true confidence, a person who is able to just stand firmly and say, I'm good at these things, these are my limits, and I'm gonna maximize what I'm capable to do in this arena, and I'm gonna play my part, but I'm not gonna try to overextend or push everybody. You know what I mean? Like a person who's truly confident in their arena is an attractive person. People want to be around that. So as leaders, as we're developing ourselves and growing, developing a sense of true confidence is important, because that's going to be part of what attracts people to you, right? True confidence allows you to be vulnerable, because if you recognize that I'm doing okay, and you can accept the things that you're great at and affirm yourself in the areas where you have actual strength, then in the areas where you're weak, you're able to be more vulnerable and open. So I am great at fill in the blank. Somebody tell me what you're great at. One person just share. I'm great at
Building relationships.
Great at building relationships. What else? Who else?
Being organized.
But you have to say, I am great at.
I'm great at being organized.
Great at being organized. Who else?
I'm great at listening to people.
You are great at listening to people, Evan.
You're very good.
Who else? Who else?
I'm great at I'm great at making people feel included.
You're a great includer. Awesome. Who else?
I'm great at casting vision.
Great at casting vision. Perfect. Anybody online would like to share something you're great at?
You just moved inside.
Sam, Claude, Maddie, Parker, what are you great at?
What?
I'm great at loving people.
You are. You are.
I feel loved even just hearing you say that. That's it? That's it. All right. All right, moving on. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Evan is great at listening. And you should grow in your confidence in your ability to listen. Listening is actually one of the most powerful tools in communication,
Yeah.
right? The ability to, as Stephen Covey said in 7 Habits, to listen with the intent to respond, right? Was that it? Let me see. Listen with the intent
To understand.
to understand, not respond. Yeah, I was like, that doesn't sound right. Listen with the intent to understand, not respond. You're going to be great at that as you continue to grow and develop that skill and grow in that confidence, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that being excellent at listening means you're also excellent at casting vision. So all of a sudden, what should be a strength and a source of confidence, I'm great at listening, can also be a source of great insecurity, but I'm not good at communicating, right? Not necessarily for you, but you see how that works.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be the other side of the coin. And so if you have a great strength in a particular area, I'm great at building relationships, you might not be good at organizing, because those two are very different skill sets. I'm great at organizing, I might struggle with relationships. Now, I'm not saying that about you or you, I'm just saying you see how this works. And what we have a tendency to do is, rather than choosing the path of confidence to say, I'm great at casting vision, I'm great at loving people well, I'm great at organizing, and I'm going to build my confidence around the things that I'm great at, we have a tendency to focus in on the things that we're not great at. And so we're like, well, yeah, I'm good at relationships, but what does that really matter? You know, so even Pastor Stephen, I heard him say one time that, have you heard the phrase, talk is cheap? Mm-hmm. Right. People say that. Well, words, you know, it's easy to throw out words, talk is cheap. But, you know, prove it. Proof is in the pudding. Show me the money. Whatever. There's all these ideas around, like, you can say all you want to say, but until you show me. And so Pastor Stephen, what does he do for a living? He talks. Right? Doesn't matter how great he is at it. Doesn't matter how many people in the world are interested to see everything that he has to say and are waiting for noon on Monday to, you know, hit refresh and listen to his sermon. There's a possibility that because he's great at talking, he could choose to embrace an insecurity about, yeah, but talk is cheap. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I don't think he does, but he could. And that's where we find ourselves. So, does that make sense? You with me?
Yeah.
So, what's his name? Doesn't matter what his name is. But every virtue carries the seed of its own destruction. Every virtue. Every virtue carries the seed of its own destruction, meaning if you are really great with people, you may actually not be particularly organized. Those two things may go hand in hand. So if you happen to be great with people and organized, you might not have enough free time to actually relax, and you might not be able to recharge, and you're in the threat of burning out. You see what I'm saying? Like every virtue carries the seed of its own destruction. On the other hand, an unguarded strength is a double weakness. So if you're excellent with relationships, then that means you may build them so efficiently and so quickly and have so many that you ultimately can't carry them all. You see what I'm saying? And you find yourself lonely and starved for meaningful relationship because you have so many that none of them really have any depth. You see what I'm saying? So an unguarded strength can be double. All of those things have a tendency to create that sense in us, which is, I'm not good enough. What is it all for? Why aren't I like somebody else? And comparison kills contentment, and here we are. Now we're struggling with insecurity. So this is a caveat. Another thing is false humility is not true humility. And false humility is ultimately it's like an Achilles heel to confidence. So when somebody says, man, you did that really well, and you say, it was God, all God. Well, yes, certainly. Thank you for acknowledging that there is a creator of the universe and that he has organized atoms from the beginning of time and set up a natural law so that when your mom and dad, I get it. Thank you so much. But yeah, last I checked though, you don't need to take notes on that. Last I checked though, God was not the one up there with the microphone vibrating his vocal cords, right? Certainly he gave you the breath. And we all need to recognize that in humility, apart from Christ, we are nothing. I get that. But if you receive a compliment and then push it away with a sense of false humility, you're actually just stealing your own strength and energy. You see what I'm saying? That's not helpful. So you don't want to go the other extreme and be like, oh yeah, I am awesome. I certainly am. Let's get everybody involved with this conversation because this is a good topic. Right. You don't want to go the other way, but false humility is not helpful. It's not true humility. True humility is able to say, thank you.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you. That really means a lot to me. I'm encouraged by that. I know.
Or
Jumanji. Or Academy. Could be Academy. Could be my daughter. Okay, make sense? All right, here's a scripture verse, Matthew chapter 7. Jesus said, do not build your house on the sand or it will be destroyed. Instead, build it on the rock and it will stand. Right? Go back and read that passage of scripture. I think it's 21 through 23 or something like that, Matthew chapter 7. He talks about the storm is going to come. Exact storm comes in both scenarios. You've heard this before, I think. The storm that hit the house that was built on the sand is the same storm that hit the house that's built on the rock. So that's where you have to step back and say, confidence is a choice. Confidence is me building my house on the right foundation, right? It's a decision, because confidence doesn't mean confidence is not the same as avoiding the storm. I said something there, maybe you didn't hear it.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Confidence is not the same as there is no storm. So if what you need is circumstances to work out so that you can ultimately feel that you've got it all together and that you're stable, then you will always be feeling like you're getting knocked over, because circumstances are going to rage one way or the other, right? We need to stop being tossed back and forth by the wind and the waves. We need to recognize that sometimes the storm is going to rage against us, sometimes everything's going to go our way, but in both scenarios we need to learn to be content, whether well-fed and hungry, living in plenty or in want. I know how to do all things, right? Because Christ strengthens me. We have to have our foundation on the rock. So I wanted to show you a video, because y'all are, I think the eKids Theater, I don't know if we do this on purpose, like lighting wise, to get high energy kids to kind of feel droopy, but eKids Theater has a way of just kind of sucking energy out of everyone. It's like a gray, kind of dreary. So here, let's introduce a cool video. Wait, okay.
Yes, oh my gosh.
Have you seen this?
I love this video so much.
So this is what happens when our confidence is built on circumstances. Okay? So you'll notice that there's a season of a section of this video where the raccoon is extremely confident, and then all of a sudden something in the circumstances shifts, and you see confidence turn into insecurity. Okay, this is very helpful. This will really help you. Can you see past my head? Can you guys see it okay? Online? So.
Yeah, turn the lights off.
Yeah, they're in Florida.
All right, go ahead.
Look at that. Cute. Just like Martha a little bit.
Excuse me.
It's a big one.
Oh.
Whoa. Big raccoon on top.
Confident.
Cats look so confused, like, what is this kid?
Why is he putting? He's making the food.
He wants it softer.
Oh, frick.
And
We runs away of dead.
insecure.
He's like a real wise guy.
Why is this dude so close to the raccoon?
All right.
Can we watch that just one more time?
It just
Get out video.
just watch him grab the food and run away real quick.
Yeah, we just need to see that.
And then the second time we watch it, I just want you to think of yourself. Okay, you just, this is what you look like when you give into insecurity.
Dang.
Where is it? Oh, there it
It
is.
looked like a raccoon running away with catnip in his hands. So,
All right, well,
There we go.
there he is.
no, just zoom to the end. I don't want to watch the whole thing again. Keep going.
Right there.
No, a little bit further,
Oh.
All right, we get it? You get it? Okay, he's nervous. He's about to come back.
He's thinking of his plan.
This is me.
The walking and
And
grabbing
I'm out. Okay, so I know this is stupid, but I just needed to break it up a little bit. So I really do think that we look silly sometimes. I really do. I really think that we kind of, the raccoon, without realizing that somebody was sitting there videoing it, walks up and he's like, "Get out of here, cats, it's my food."
Yeah.
I'm not going to make too much out of this, but the point is, nothing changed about the actual circumstances, right? The guy was there videoing the whole time.
Right.
It's just because the raccoon noticed that the guy was there, all of a sudden he freaks out and he's insecure and things all this, right?
Yeah.
So circumstances, if we can just get ourselves to realize that the circumstances, there's always going to be a storm,
Yeah.
right? There's always some guy standing there with a video camera capturing everything. You're always simultaneously succeeding and failing. It's always that way. And so we shouldn't get so caught off guard when we say something dumb and people react in a funny way, and now we feel this flush of anxiety and shame, right? We shouldn't be so surprised because we're always dealing with circumstances that are. Sometimes there's this funny little proverb that says, let me see, how does it go exactly? I think it's like, don't listen closely when your servants are speaking, because you'll ultimately hear them saying things about you, or something like that. Instead, recognize that people are always saying stuff about you, and just move on. Just don't listen. The point is, I can't remember exactly how it was. That was a terrible paraphrase. The point is, people are always talking bad about you. Just because you heard it in that particular situation doesn't mean it's the only time it ever happened, right? People are always talking bad about you and everybody else. It's what we do. We talk about each other and we say stupid stuff. right? Just because they accidentally texted it to you instead of somebody else, hypothetically speaking, you know, just because. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. It means you just became aware of it. And so when you look up and you see the dude standing there with the video camera and all of a sudden you feel this sense of insecurity, that's where we start looking silly, because we have to be a little bit more humble about circumstances in that. So one of the things, I don't know if I've said it quite as much to you guys, but I've come to the place of realizing that circumstantial shifts don't heal soul sickness.
Sorry.
So circumstantial shifts don't heal soul sickness. Right? Let's really, really milk this raccoon video for all that it's worth. Circumstantial shifts don't heal soul sickness. And the reason is because your soul is going to be in and out of all sorts of different circumstances. And if it's sick, it's sick. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. If you've built your house on the sand, it's going to fall when the storm comes. You with me?
Yeah, that's great vision.
So there's another illustration. I used to work construction, as you know. Maybe you didn't know, but I used to work construction. And they nicknamed me the squirrel. So lots of woodland rodents in this illustration, in this teaching. And the reason they did that is because it doesn't bother me to be up high. It doesn't bother me running across rafters. It doesn't bother me. I don't have any issue with heights, and I don't have any issue with wobbly boards. I'm fine. Like, I'm able to be up there. So they nicknamed me the squirrel. That was when I was 25, so maybe at 39 I might be a little bit more hesitant, but at the time, whatever. The highest peak, 12 pitch, doesn't matter. Put me up there, I'm fine. And so they called me the squirrel. So there's lots of different phases if you're trying to sheet a roof. So you got rafters that are all exposed, rafters are wobbling back and forth. You're putting plywood up to kind of stabilize everything. And so there'd be the guy on the ground who's pushing the plywood up. There's the dude, me, who would grab the plywood, carry it across the rafters, and then plop it down where it needs to be nailed. And then there's usually a third guy who was actually nailing it in place, right? So the first row is the hardest because everything is the most wobbly, and there's nothing to stand on. Once you get the first row down, then now you can stand on the plywood, and so it's at that point it's just hard work. So we were in the process of finishing up the first row, and Brandon Fitzmaurice, a Cajun, an LSU fan, Brandon Fitzmaurice, he was the nailer. So I was bringing the wood, I would slap it down in place, we would slide it over, get it positioned, and then he would nail it in. And sometimes it's a lot faster to do, tack nails to hold it in place, and then you have to go back and adjust the rafters, make sure they're all square. So he was tack nailing everything. It's still fine. 6 nails and a piece of plywood is fine for you to walk on. It's not hurricane proof, but it's fine for you to walk on. So that's what happened. We're like 5-6 pieces of plywood in. Now I've got a track to run on, and my confidence level going from wobbly trusses to nailed down plywood has increased dramatically. Walking on a 4-foot surface is a lot easier than walking on an 1.5-inch surface. Make sense? So I went from kind of being careful navigating wobbly trusses to just walking confidently across this roof. I'm carrying 25-pound sheets of plywood. I'm running across a pitch. It was probably a 6 pitch, so it's got some of an incline. But I'm confident now because we've got this plywood path to walk across. Except Brandon Fitzmaurice, being a total doofus, didn't put the right number of nails in one of the pieces of wood. So he only put like 2 instead of 6. And so as I was walking with increased confidence, I'm going across this piece of plywood multiple times. We're getting to the end of the first run. All of a sudden, the 2 nails that he put in gave way. So I am walking confidently across plywood, thinking that it's a solid path, and it just slipped out from underneath me. So the plywood that I'm carrying went flying. The plywood that I was standing on went flying. Of course, now I'm 12 feet up in the air with wobbly rafters, and I fell through and I scraped up my side real bad, and I was very angry. So, whatever. The rest of the day, probably another 2 hours, I'm now having to do what? I'm having to overcome the insecurity, right? Because every single time I take a step, I'm nervous that another piece of plywood is going to give out. So now I'm looking at the nails. I'm like glaring at Brandon Fitzmaurice. I'm listening for the pops of the nail gun. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, finally, idiot. That's what's happening. I'm hyper vigilant and hyper focused because what I thought was going to be stable ended up not being stable at all, and I wasn't able to stand firm on the ground that should have been sturdy, right? Make sense? That is the picture of insecurity. Insecurity is what happens when what we thought was stable turns out to be shifty. You see what I'm saying? The guy who built his house on the sand didn't say, you know what, I'm going to build this house and invest all this income and resource so that it can be knocked over in the next storm. No, he built it there assuming that it would be stable. Right? You don't build a house so that it gets destroyed in the next storm that comes along. You build it because you don't necessarily know that it's unstable. You see what I'm saying? So that's what gets tricky about insecurity, is that it often catches us off guard. So a helpful exercise for you, if you just wanted to put like a little spot here in your notes, a helpful exercise for you would be, what are some areas where you feel confident that you might actually be at great risk of insecurity because your confidence is built on the wrong platform, right? I know that's a difficult thing to think through, but you might actually, so for example, boil that down to relationships. What relationship might you feel really confident in, but as you evaluate the relationship, you realize it's built on a circumstantial foundation. Circumstantial foundations are going to be shaky. Okay? Can anybody think of an example in a relationship?
Maybe like for me with like different teams. So when I was on worship experience, it was kind of like everybody on that team you're friends with. Now that I'm not that I'm not friends with them, but it's like I see them here and there versus going to lunch and all that other stuff. Yep.
So yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. So that's why when you're in third grade, you're best friends with Jeremy, and when you're in fourth grade and he's in a different class, you never talk to him. Because that relationship was built on affinity or proximity. You see what I'm saying? That's not a good foundation for a healthy relationship. So relationships in this room may be like that. Right? Because you're only connected based on the proximity of being in 2K2 together. Unless you've done the hard work of actually investing in a relationship to build it deeper. Okay? If you do the hard work of actually building a relationship on a sturdy foundation, then you can count on it a little bit more. But if it's only proximity, it's not a sturdy foundation. So you therefore shouldn't be surprised if 6 months from now, Justin hadn't called you to talk into the wee hours of the night anymore, right? I mean, it was proximity. Don't hold him to that standard. You haven't invested at that level, so don't expect that return. Are you with me? Yeah. No, Justin probably will call you and talk into the wee hours of the night. I'm just using him as an illustration. That make sense? So that's relationships. Huh? Stay up. It's coming. You could do this. So there's your assignment. I think it would be important for you to go kind of navigate through. Hello, Sharetta. Nice to see you. Navigate through different categories. Relationships will be one. Maybe finances would be one. Here's an example where another one in relationships. This is a good one. It's easier to navigate. If you meet somebody when you're in high school and then transition through different seasons, who you are in high school is different from who you are in college, is different from who you are in young adulthood, is different who you are when you have kids, is different than who you are when you don't have kids anymore, right? So the reason that some marriages fail is because they try to keep their relationship built on a foundation that was created in a totally different set of circumstances. They don't grow together. And so my wife and I, we've been dating since we were 17. But our relationship today is very different than what it was when we were 17. We had no responsibilities, we had no money, we had no cares, we had nothing, and so we're able to just kind of like be together, and it didn't matter. Now we have a lot that we have to do together. There's a functionality to our relationship. If we had tried to maintain our relationship like it was when we were 17, now that we're 39, that's not going to work, right? You got to grow through. We get that intuitively. So hopefully an illustration. So think through your life. Think through different categories. So skill sets would be another one to evaluate. So some of you have very specific skill sets. If your confidence in your skill set is built on the success of using that skill set in the past, right? Or the success of you using that skill set in the current circumstances, then what happens when the demand on your skill doubles? You see what I'm saying? What happens? If it's built on success and the demand doubles, you're going to have to, by nature, go through a season of failure. see what I'm saying? So what's your confidence built on is all I'm saying. If it's, I probably could go on and on, but I won't. What thoughts do you have at this point? If you have any. This would be so much more fun if you participate.
I don't know if this is a thought on this adding on, because I have the same, one thing so I guess I can ask based on you and Heather and how your relationship has changed. So I've had the same best friend since middle school. And I'm always afraid, like.
Taffy?
No.
Different best friend.
Aisha. I'm always afraid, like, when we get married, like, how that's gonna change, because we literally talk every single day for hours. And she's always like, so are we still gonna be friends when we get married? Like, we're not gonna be able to do this. So just with you in your relationship with Heather, like, how has that changed since you guys were 17 and now you're 39?
Yeah. Well, let me answer that in parts. It will absolutely change drastically. So what you should be doing now with Aisha is digging into the foundation of your relationship at a different level, knowing that change is coming, right? So if the relationship is circumstantial and you're relying on each other at the level that both of you will eventually need to rely on your spouse, right? Then the relationship's going to erode, because that's going to have to shift. In the same way that the Bible teaches that that's why we have to leave our mother and father and cleave to our spouse, there has to be a necessary separation. That you and Aisha are moving towards a necessary separation. So you know that's coming, right? Since you know that it's coming, then you can begin building on a different foundation today in anticipation of that shift. So what does it look like to build that foundation? I don't know your relationship. But what I can say is once you guys are married, your spouse will not be able to provide for you in every area. And it is actually very healthy to continue to have relationships with people, that are friends. Because Heather can't give me everything that I need. She's not built that way. She's not supposed to. I've got to have some guy friends that I can, go watch Avengers Infinity War with. Because Heather hates that movie, And it's to her shame, for sure. But she hates that movie. So I have to have I know I'm being silly, but I have to have other relationships. So if Aisha becomes that other relationship, that's fine. But also keep in mind, your husband may hate her husband. It's possible. It's possible. And so just whatever. You got to move on. You got to move on. Your relationships have to shift when you get married. Your relationships shift when you have kids. Your relationship shifts if your kids are in a different season of life than your friends' kids. So if my kids are still in elementary school and my friends' kids are, kind of moving on to more like the sports and the travel, we're not, the affinity is going to change, and that's okay. So I know I didn't necessarily solve your problem, but yes, sir.
So earlier you mentioned how false humility is the weakness of true confidence, and
okay.
And I'm just wondering, how have you seen the inverse? Like, how have you seen humility, like true humility, build true confidence?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked that. I think I probably would cover it later, so I'll skip it over when we get to it later. I think we have a tendency to think of humility and confidence at best as being the opposites.
Yeah.
I think at worst we think of them being opposed.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not. They are actually synonymous.
Yeah.
True humility and true confidence are the same thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And false humility and arrogance or pride, insecurity and pride insecurity and arrogance are both synonyms of the word pride, is the point. So pride says, look at me, I'm awesome. Insecurity says, don't look at me, I'm terrible. Both are trying to make it all about me, right? Humility says, I don't have every gift. Confidence says, I have these gifts and I'm great at them, right? But it ends up being about the gift, or it ends up being about the impact, or it ends up being about the other. You see what I'm saying? Humility and confidence are both focused on the purpose. So maybe try this on. If we consider our lives like plays, okay, so don't be offended, but I am the lead role in the play of John Bishop. Y'all are just supporting actors. I'm sorry. You know, the lead role's taken. You can't have the spot. It's me. Now you get to be the lead role in the Evan Norris play. You know. Yeah. It is silly. I never thought of it like this, but we often try to take the lead role in somebody else's play. It never works out. We can't do that through comparison. We do that through comparison.
Oh, shoot.
Doesn't work. But so you have to understand, like, if our lives are plays, just as an analogy, and I'm the lead player, then when the spotlight comes on in that main scene where I'm supposed to come out and deliver the monologue, whatever that might be, perform according to my gifts, show up when I'm called upon, you know, spotlight's on and the stage is there, there's an audience watching. You guys might be the audience in my world, in a sense. So the spotlight's on and I show up and don't deliver, or I hunker backstage because I'm afraid, right? That's not humility. That's awkward. Spotlight comes on, curtains open, no lead role, no actor. That's awkward. Nobody wants to pay for that play. That's a horrible play. So your ability to show up and deliver, and hopefully deliver well, people don't see in a play, if you've ever been to a play, they don't see the actors. They're experiencing the story, right? And so the best actors are invisible. It's just part, you know, it's just, you're watching it unfold. And you and I are intended to be, so C.S. Lewis would say that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less, right? It's not about me, it's about what I'm doing. It's about what I'm contributing. It's about what I'm for. So I was having the breakfast with a guy named Jared this morning, and he said that in each circumstance that he walks into, he's a young guy, and in each circumstance that he walks into, the important question is, who do I need to be in this circumstance? I think that's fine. I think that's going to get him through the next 5 years or so. The problem with that question is you have to now understand the circumstances to answer that question well. It means I have to speculate about who the people are, what the pressures might be, what their expectations of me might be, and what's kind of inherently flawed about the question of who do I need to be in this set of circumstances is that you don't ultimately know who you really need to be. You see what I'm saying? Right. And so I kind of passively shared that, you know, that's interesting. I have a question like that as well, but my question is a little different. My question usually is, how can I be helpful, or was I helpful in reflection? Could I have been more helpful, right? Because the idea of being helpful gets it outside of me, right? So then I admitted that 5-6 years ago, at the center of my motivations was this desire to be impressive. Once I rooted that out, I replaced it with a desire to be helpful. Sometimes being helpful is extremely impressive. Sometimes being helpful is really forgettable. My ego deals with that, okay? But it's a much more powerful motivator. Thoughts about that? Oh, he just said thanks again, by the way. Just texted me and said thanks again for time this morning. Maybe he's thinking about how he can be helpful. Let me throw out another verse real quick. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58, it says, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." You heard that verse before? Let me read it again. "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." So if your labor is in you, trying to prove yourself in a lot of different circumstances, then that is in vain. And you won't be able to stand firm because it's not a foundation that you can stand on. If your labor is about approval, it's about confidence, or about earning confidence or earning a place, right? It's about being seen. All of those, they're not sturdy foundations. But if your labor is in the Lord, if you recognize that God gave you certain gifts, has positioned you in certain places, has orchestrated events, if he's ultimately in control, then you can be confident, you can stand firm, and let nothing move you. So I wanted to talk about, I think, 5 different things, unless you have questions at this point. These are 5 discoveries I've made to defeat insecurity. One is insecurity is a sickness. Like a cold, right? How many of you struggle with allergies? When you're struggling with allergies, you look out the window and you see that the Virginia pines are about to just explode with yellow demons and ruin your life, right? You don't think I'm sick. I'm the problem. You think the trees and the pollen are the problem. You see what I'm saying? Right. And you might feel sick, you might feel under the weather, you might have infections, you might have to take medication, but you don't shift your view of your own identity based on your allergies, because you see that it's a sickness, and there's a timeline associated with sickness, and there's a cure that you can bring into a sickness, right? A sickness. You don't feel healthy. It's not necessarily good, but it's manageable, and you can ultimately look forward to a time when it's going to change. So think about insecurity as a sickness. It is a problem, and we feel it. But just because you have a sinus infection doesn't mean you can't show up to work, right? Just because you have a sinus infection doesn't mean that you can't, take proactive measures to try to help yourself. Do a little nasal rinse, whatever you do. Go to the doctor. There are things that you can do. So it is a problem. Insecurity is a problem. We all feel this pressure of insecurity. Insecurity is a sickness, but it's cured not through circumstances. It's cured through choice.
Oh, that's great.
Okay? It's cured through choice, insecurity. So I wanted to show you this next video. I love this video. It's a commercial. It's a Duracell battery commercial. How many of you know who Derek Coleman is? Good, it'll be better. So Derek Coleman's football player for Seattle Seahawks. I think he still plays with them. He might not be on their team anymore.
Sports.
You're gonna like it. So this is what it looks like to have an issue, but to choose to not allow that issue to leave you feeling sick. Make sense?
They told me it couldn't be done, that I was the lost cause. I was picked on and picked last. Coach didn't know how to talk to me. They gave up on me. Told me I should just quit. And the last day, they didn't call my name. Told me it was over. But I've been deaf since I was 3, so I didn't listen. And now I'm here with the loudest fans in the NFL cheering me on, and I can hear them all.
Excuse me, I'm going to go buy 100 batteries. I mean, one of my favorite lines, obviously, is they picked on me, they told me I couldn't do it, they told me I should quit, but I've been deaf since I was 3, so I didn't listen. Right? I've been deaf since I was 3, so I didn't listen. And, so you can choose to see your past circumstances as things that are holding you back, or you can, like Joseph, stand up and say, all that was intended for evil is actually for good, to save many people. It had to happen, right? It had to happen. It had to happen just the way that it did, because if it didn't happen that way, I wouldn't be where I am. You see what I'm saying? And it's a choice that we make. So it doesn't mean that it's easy. There's a lot of struggle built into that video. The reason it's inspiring is because you can put yourself in his shoes emotionally, and you can remember when you felt like you didn't have what it takes, and you can remember when people are trying to push you down. And we love that video because we want ourselves to be able to say, but I've been deaf since I was 3, so I didn't listen. You see what I'm saying? That's what we want for ourselves. And all I'm trying to tell you is you can have it. You can have it. You can also look in the face of critics and difficult circumstances, and you can say, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm not listening to that. I'm choosing a path of confidence. So Pastor asked a question a couple years ago in staff advance. And he said, how many of you on staff, this is our staff and spouses, so it's like 350 people in the room, and it's the church staff, fastest growing church in America, this super successful worldwide impact organization, and it's our staff. It's not like these are a bunch of just random sampling of population of people. This is like the staff of the church that 2 years ago you guys were like, oh, if I could just get there. That's our staff. And at the same time as you maybe were watching a clip online or YouTube or something like that, or hanging out serving in the context of our ministry, wishing that you could be a part of it, Pastor was asking our staff, how many of you are having a crisis of confidence? And probably like 50 to 60% of our staff ended up on stage. In response to the question, how many of you are having a crisis of confidence? What's good about that is that we've got a culture where we can be vulnerable and we can share, and Pastor ended up praying over us. It was a very powerful moment. It was awesome. A lot of people were set free in that moment. I stayed on the floor because it's not that I didn't feel a sense of like insecurity. It's that I have decided I can never have a crisis of confidence, because confidence is a choice that I make, right? Crisis of confidence implies that confidence is something that I can gain or lose, and it's not. It's something that I choose. It makes sense? And so I stood there on the floor feeling a little overwhelmed, feeling like I didn't necessarily have what it takes, feeling all these things that I tend to feel, but I can't be in a crisis of confidence, because all I have to do to remove myself from feeling insecure is to choose to be confident. That's the way I believe. If my confidence is truly in Christ, if my work is for the Lord, then I have the opportunity to stand firm then and let nothing move me. You with me?
Yeah.
I know this is like, well, it's easier said than done. No, actually it's not. It's not. It's easier done. You know, just wake up, and when insecurity causes you to feel that flush of shame and like I shouldn't do it, I shouldn't go, just show up anyway. Just go anyway. Just sing anyway. Just say it anyway. Just do the thing anyway.
Yeah.
Just take a step forward. And I think it's in moving forward that we ultimately find I don't have to be bound up and wrapped up and controlled and manipulated and pushed down by a feeling of insecurity. I can choose confidence. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So it is a discipline, it is a choice, and it is difficult, but it's not impossible. And insecurity is a sickness, and the sickness is cured through choice. I'll skip that. What time is it? I'll skip that. Jeremiah, my 10-year-old son, he is not the writer of the book in the Bible. Jeremiah is pretty artistic. He actually reminds me of Evan, personality. A little bit more quiet, good listener, kind of very smart, but in his head sometimes. And, you know, when it comes to like expressing his emotions, as a father, I'm kind of like, okay, listen, I understand if you don't want to share your emotions with everybody, but I'm your dad, so tell me what you're feeling. And he's like, you know, his favorite thing. He's only 10, so I'm trying not to put too much pressure on him, but I'm also trying to train him, you know, trying to help him see that you have to have certain people that you let in. And so he's not particularly athletic, but he's enjoyed soccer, and so he's tried to play soccer. Soccer is a source of insecurity for him, because my middle son, Micah, he actually is kind of the opposite. He's very athletic, but when he steps out on the field, he just assumes I'm the best one out here. and everyone wants me here, and everyone wants me on their team. And I love that about him. He's very confident, but sometimes his confidence isn't necessarily justified by his skill or experience. You know, so he played basketball for the first time this last year, and when Micah steps out on the court, he's kind of like, hey guys, I'm here. And he's got like the socks and the shoes and the shirt and the bandana, and he's got everything. You know, it's like he's an NBA player, but he's just, you know, 3'7". And he walks in. Jeremiah's not like that. Jeremiah might actually legitimately be good at something, but he steps on the field like, I'm not sure if I'm going to fit, right? And so trying to push him a little bit, I try to like find different ways to like help him step into the arena and show up. So what I have to do when I'm seeing Jeremiah play, he thinks that he's bad at soccer. And so what I have to do is be like, break it down. Okay, well, maybe you're not the best soccer player in the field, but what are you good at? On the soccer field, what are you good at? And so we started with defense. I'm good at defense. Okay, great. So let's get better at defense. You know, don't worry about whether you've scored a goal or not. Don't worry about whether you're good at passing. Don't worry about whether when the ball's flying towards you that you kind of flinch and, you know, don't want to hit your head. Don't worry about all those things yet. Let's just continue to improve in the areas that you're great, right? Focus in. So strategy to that. If you're going to cure your sickness of insecurity, you got to hone in on the thing that you're great at and focus on that. Take a step in the direction of something that you're good at. So the other day, we've been 5 years now, I think, playing, maybe 4 years. Jeremiah's been playing soccer. The other day in one of his games, we've been working on the punch through, so he's moving more into the offense now. And the punch through, if you're in soccer, is like you just kick it past the last defender into open space. And because the other person is backwards, you know, it's harder for them to turn around and chase the ball down, especially in his age. So you can punch it through, and then you can